It's all good. I'm here in the studio, just finished doing a class, and now I'm spilling the tea with Dr. P.
Hey, Spilling the Tea with Dr. P. So, of course, we were supposed to be doing this on LinkedIn Live, but we ran into some technical difficulties. You know, I'm still trying to get used to all the social media and the technology stuff. You know, I'm a Dewey Decimal System kind of girl. Like, remember the old library system?
I'm right there with you.
So I was like, I guess we're not going to do it on LinkedIn Live. We're going to do it on Facebook. And eventually I'll get myself caught up so that I can go ahead and take it over to LinkedIn Live. But thanks for being flexible with me.
Absolutely.
Last year, my team was like, hey, we should do something. You know, Dr. Plummer, you love talking all the time. You got an opinion about everything. You know everybody. Why don't we go ahead and do something fun for yourself and for the people who are into mental health and who like your style? And they came up with the term Spillin Tea with Dr. P. And so I'm excited about it. And then they said, who do you want to be your first person? And I said, it has to be Dr. Jacquelyn Pelham-Crouch, my girl, my homie. And so I'm glad that you agreed to do this with me and embark on this new journey with me as we start spilling the tea on a whole bunch of different topics. But today we're talking about mental health and yoga. So super excited to have you here. Do you want to introduce yourself a bit?
Well, first of all, I'm honored to be here and honored to be your first guest. That's awesome. So sure, my name is Jacquelyn Crouch-Pelham. I am a perinatologist, which is a high-risk obstetrician. I take care of high-risk pregnant women in the city of Baltimore, and that is truly a passion for me. I'm from the Virginia Beach area, went to Norfolk State University, behold the green and gold. And then, you know, went on to do an MBA in medical service management, and then branched out into more holistic healing practices like yoga, meditation, Reiki, things of that nature. I am a proud mother to 6-year-old twins, Evan and Ian, and also a proud wife to Rebecca. So that's my little world right there.
That's a lot in that world. That's a 6-year-old twins. I can understand why you got to do some yoga and some meditation with some 6-year-old twins.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, you know, my kids are big, 13 and 16, and this year 17 and 14. Like, I'm like, how did this happen? How did the years go by that fast?
Yeah, young adults.
Right, and I'm like, where did you come from? Like, what happened to you? How'd you get this big? I don't know. So with that history and being a physician, how did you get into yoga? Like, what brought you to yoga? Was there like this one kind of aha moment, or was it a series of things? Because and we'll talk about culture in a little bit, but yoga we didn't normally call yoga a Black people thing, right? So like, how were you introduced into yoga, and what made you want to get deeper into it enough to start Replenish?
So I was introduced to yoga many, many years ago by a physician friend of mine who took me and another friend to hot yoga. So you can imagine this is a upper 90 or 100 degree plus room. This is my first yoga experience, and I nearly died. It was just a lot. So I didn't venture back to it for some time, but a year or so after the twins were born, I needed a reset of sorts. Pretty much the majority of my life, I would say, I would consider myself a high achiever, and with that came a lot of discipline and structure and kind of tightly controlled and maybe even somewhat inflexible existence, right? So that's how it was for 43 years of my life. And then I became a mother. And a mother to twins, no less. And that, as you know, as a mother, takes structure and control and inflexibility out of the window. Like, you kind of, you know, have to relinquish control. You have to kind of be flexible, and maybe have to adjust some of the things that you used to be able to do, and do it well, and maybe pull back from some of those things. And that was a very hard wall to hit for me, a hard adjustment for me. I was still trying to do everything I was doing before the twins in the way that I was doing it before the twins. And it was taxing me. It was taxing me physically. It was taxing me mentally and emotionally. My relationships were suffering. And, I literally thought that I was kind of losing it. And so I remember being in the bedroom and found this YouTube challenge, a 10-day yoga YouTube challenge. Yeah. And it was 10 to 12 minutes a day. Yeah. And I don't know how I got to that yoga challenge, but some kind of way I made my way there and did those little 10 minutes a day for 10 days. And it completely changed my life. Completely changed my life. And so I've had a steady practice since then. Of course, have gone on to get, formal training in a 200-hour training, and then a subsequent additional 300 hours at Spiritual Essence Yoga with my guru, Dana. She's awesome. And with that, going on to how we get here to replenish, as I became more of a practitioner and was going to classes on a regular basis, I noticed that the spaces I was entering weren't always welcoming, weren't always culturally sensitive, weren't always, there wasn't a sense of belonging. I was often, the only Black or brown person in the room. I very rarely saw a Black or brown instructor. And certainly didn't conceive at the time, outside of my training, that which came later, that there was a Black or brown studio owner. And so I really had a calling to create a space for people like me. Yeah. Not only on the student side, because when you're in predominantly white spaces and you see another Black person, you kind of give each other a look like, I'm so glad you're here. I see you. And that's how it was with yoga. And I also remember how I felt when I saw a Black instructor. It was like, oh, we exist. Yeah. So I wanted to create that space not only for students, but for also yoga instructors, because as a Black yoga instructor, when you teach in other studios, you as the minority may need to assimilate. Yeah. And therefore you're not authentically showing up as, how you might teach the class. And so I wanted to also provide a space for instructors of color to show up and teach the way that they are inclined to teach.
Yeah. Absolutely. That was so rich, Jay. There was so much in there. So right now we're at the top of the year where everybody is doing a challenge, right? Like you have the oblique challenge, you got the busted challenge, you got all sorts of challenges, right? Listen, that's my thing. I'll be like, okay. But
that's about as far as I could go.
Listen, because my knees don't. Okay, another. I was in the 99s and 2000s. The dances we were. Never mind. Let's move on. Let's move on.
That's another show.
Right. So from the challenge that got you introduced or got you reintroduced to yoga, you said that it was transformative. It changed your life. And I could see how it changed it on big ways, right? Like you were able to start replenish and, you are who you are because of this. But let's go back to when you was doing the challenge and you had these 10-minute or 12-minute increments. What were you learning in those moments? What were you doing what were you experiencing in that moment that made you say, I'm going to do this again tomorrow? I'm going to do this again the next day.
Yeah. There was a peace that I experienced, in yoga. There is the practice of tuning out to tune in, and a clearing, if you will, and you're really focused and present on the moment. So I wasn't thinking about all the things I had to do. I wasn't maybe replaying things that had already happened. I was completely in the moment, and there's a peace and a rest in that when you are just present. And then there is a connection to your body. I had become disconnected from my body, disconnected from my identity, and it was a way to reconnect with myself. There's also the practice of surrender, and being able to understand and accept things that are out of your control. And there is just an acceptance also of a learning curve in failure. You don't get every pose right off the bat, and so you fail, but you continue to try, and you continue to grow, and you continue to progress without judgment. So it started to introduce some of those concepts of acceptance and surrender and connection and releasing and peace. Yeah.
So for like 10 minutes a day, you were experiencing a peace in the middle of chaos, if you will. Like you had the babies and, both marriage and children. We talk about this all the time in terms of how it really causes you to shift your identity, to shift how you see yourself, and even how you shift to see the world. But in all of that, you were saying that you were able to carve out 10 minutes to just experience that peace. What happened for you when you came out of that 10 minutes? Did you feel like refreshed, or did you feel like greedy, I want more? Or were you feeling like, dang, I couldn't stay focused the whole time on my breathing? Like, what happened at that 11th minute or that 12th minute? Like, what happened right after that?
You shed a tear. No. It's like it's 10 minutes over already. With practice, and this is actually one of the reasons I came up with the name Replenish is, and I know many have heard the saying, you cannot pour from an empty cup. And you cannot, we are supposed to serve from our overflow, meaning you fill yourself up and then you serve others from the excess. You never meant to deplete. And so what happens often is we give until, you have nothing for yourself. And so at the 11th minute, I felt better equipped because I have filled myself up some, better equipped to handle whatever challenges were going to come my way. And then, it's a combination of those things you said, and that, yes, I wanted more. Those 10 minutes had a profound effect and allowed me to kind of enter situations in a calmer way, in a more clear way. And so, yes, I wanted more of that. But in short, it just built up my reserves.
Yeah.
Filled me up.
It's so interesting. That's how I feel. I do meditation almost daily here at the house, mostly, and I love it when I get an opportunity to work with you all at Replenish, not just you and instructing, but also your team, because they're wonderful. But I feel that way after my meditation, whether it's a 5-minute meditation or a 10-minute meditation. Sometimes I can only get in 10 minutes, right? Because I'm trying to exercise, and then I need to make my breakfast, and I need to go and get ready for work, and I need to do this. And so I can only squeeze in about 10 minutes. But after that, I feel like ready. I feel like an emotional and spiritual warrior, right? Like, okay, I have on my armor now, and I can go out and whatever I need to face, I will be able to do it in a very strong manner. The first time I was introduced to yoga, it was right when I was pregnant with Deuce, my son. And so it's interesting that you mentioned that you really got into yoga after the kids, because you mentioned something around being disconnected. And I want to talk a little bit about that from your position as a physician as well, because I do think that pregnant women are women who are even in childbearing ages. So you don't necessarily have to be pregnant, right? Like you could be wanting to be pregnant You could have been pregnant and the process didn't yield a baby, whatever the case may be. But I do feel like sometimes when we're in those childbearing years, our body isn't really ours, right? Like we're looking to another human that's going, or we're sharing it with another person, or we're sharing it with another process. And I do see how that leads to disconnection, and that many women are not aware that they are actually feeling disconnected from their body. And then when we talk about it from a Black woman's perspective, we got all sorts of messages when we were young about our body, right? About how to cover our body or shame around our body. And if we develop too fast or we develop too slow, it was always a conversation in the Black home directed toward Black women. Talk to me a little bit about what that connection piece looks like in yoga. How does one connect back to themselves, whether it's because they've been disconnected through childhood or disconnected because of their childbearing ages or because of any type of trauma? How does yoga help connect us back to ourselves?
It's really attention. And so many of those things you mentioned, our attention is focused outward, on the children, on the spouse, on the job, on the responsibilities of adulting. And in our younger years, I would say, our attention is focused externally on acceptance and finding our tribe or our group where we fit in and belonging. I think the emphasis on those and attention to those external things is what disconnects us. And it's not that we shouldn't have any, it's just that not at the cost of the attention to yourself. And so with yoga, and yoga really, people are often very familiar with the physical practice of yoga, which is called asana. And that's the physical postures of yoga, but there are really 8 limbs of yoga that focus on so much more, ethical precepts about how we treat ourselves and our attitude towards ourselves and others. There's, pranayama, which is intentional control of practice of controlling the breath. And then we have, practicing non-attachment to those external things, not only sensory wise, but also extending out into relationships and things like that. And then there comes the devotion and meditation and then union with the divine. Like it is not just the physical practice, and through a combination of those things, the focus goes back in. The balance is restored, if you will, that you are in more practice with connecting and being aware of you, your existence, your experience, the energy that's flowing within you, and even your hurts, your wounds, the knots that are inside you. Those start to come to the surface as well, and you maybe start to explore them and deal with them. So there's a lot of self-discovery that usually comes about when you practice the full breath of yoga, not just the physical practice, but when you start to get into some of those other elements, you really find your way back to you. Yeah.
So I think when I think about that, I think about therapy too, right? Like where therapy is this time where you get to just explore you. Yes, maybe there's some exploration of you in relation to external elements, you in relation to your career, you in relation to your parents, you in relation to your children, but it always comes back to what you're experiencing and what you're feeling inside. And with that, I recognize that as a therapist, sometimes we're helping clients clean out some of the trauma or some of the things that they learned that hasn't served them well or that won't serve them well now. Maybe it served them well at that point, right? Because that was part of their survival or their experience, but carrying on some things that don't serve them well now. So, and then we get to compare that then in terms of now that you are a purified self, you can go out and you can do what you need to do in relation to other people. So that brings me to the question of how does yoga help a person in, say, their career? Or how does yoga help a person in relationship to God? Or how does yoga help a person in relation to their spouse? How does the individual practice of yoga have an impact on their entire world?
You're so right. It really does touch on so many of those things. I would say with regard to self, you know, the more you connect, the more your self-awareness increases. And so you're not only aware of your body, but as you know, when you have an emotional response to that, there's also a physical response to that. You know, whether your heart rate changes, whether your stomach goes in knots, whether you get chills, whether you start sweating. So there is a physical response to emotions often, and as you increase the awareness in your body, you start to also increase the awareness of the emotional effects on your body. And I mentioned the journey of self-discovery, and as you begin to learn those things, you start to ask, well, why did that provoke this type of response? And you begin to ask that over and over and over again, actually. And then you come to a truth about yourself. And it may lead you to something that happened way back when, or a belief that you developed that might have been true then, but is it true now? Yeah. And then there's the practice of, self-love. And I mentioned acceptance, but then there's forgiveness in there, and the experience of surrender to gain peace. Like it all helps with your clarity of thought. Mm-hmm. And then when you think about relationship to God or higher power, the creator, the provider, the protector, the universe, spirit, you have to get quiet to hear the voice of God, the protector, the creator, the provider, the universe. You have to get quiet to hear the voices of our ancestors and our spirit guides. You have to get quiet to hear your own voice. And so yoga is a practice that helps you be comfortable with stillness and comfortable with silence, and give you an ear to hear those messages more clearly. They're always there, but we are so tuned out sometimes that we don't hear them. So with relationship to God, I really feel like it's the stillness and the silence and the sitting. A lot of meditation is just sitting. And so much comes up, and that's hard. People say, oh, you're just sitting there. No, meditation can be difficult. Yes. With others, yoga, to the extent that we're able to give those things to ourselves: compassion, love, acceptance, grace, to the extent that we're able to give those things to ourselves, dictates our capacity to give those things to others. Mm-hmm. So when you widen your capacity for yourself, you automatically widen your capacity for others. And that also then allows that person to maybe experience something that leads them closer to their true self. Yeah. So, it's a connection like that. When I think professionally, I think, there are some concrete things like, certainly all of those things, relationship to self and self-awareness and your relationship to others, that of course is going to help you professionally. And when I think of more concrete things like yoga can increase your ability to focus and increase your ability to concentrate and, have your attention lays, on a task or a concept. And, it can increase your creativity. So, and be able to handle challenges and technical difficulties and things, you don't get as rattled, right? You're like, okay, and you're able to accept that this platform didn't work. It's not going to be available to me today. I'm not going to just decompensate. Mm-hmm. You have the wherewithal to say, but we can use this platform and we can keep going. So it allows people to also kind of handle challenges and be flexible, more so. than without the practice.
Yeah. And from that, I hear that, because we have, and we'll talk about the cultural intersections in just a sec, but I hear that you're saying that yoga is really about being still enough to connect with yourself, being still enough to hear messages that you say to yourself, messages that are coming from our ancestors, coming from our God. But also the practice of yoga, even in that stillness, allows our body to rest, allows our body to relax a bit, which increases that blood flow to our brain, right? That's the more scientific piece of yoga, because as that blood is flowing and it's more purified because of the breathing, right? Because of how we are taking in this oxygen, our blood flows differently, which allows our brain to function differently. And allows us to respond to things differently. We're not as sensitive to our senses. Our limbic system in our brain isn't always as activated because it's slowed down a little bit. We are learning to regulate our brain. So where people are thinking yoga is just stretching, it's so much more than that, because it is the physical element of your body. It's the neurological piece. It's the emotional piece. That's all connected in one. Is that right?
No, absolutely right. We could talk for an hour just about how yoga can even change the chemical balance within the body. So there's definitely a detoxifying that happens in some of the practices of yoga. But the chemicals, like your body can change as a result of practicing yoga. And as we know, there are chemicals in the body that, when they are abundant or deficient, can affect our mood.
Absolutely.
Can affect, whether we're depressed, whether we are anxious. And when we have more of a balance, then, those symptoms are less prevalent. So yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, at some point we're going to have to go, and I don't know if it's going to be this one, but at some point we should go into the scientific elements behind yoga, because again, what I hear, Jay, is I'm not going to do that yoga. Instead I'm going to go and get on this treadmill, right? I'm not going to do that yoga. You want me to get some exercise? I'm going to do this elliptical. I'm going to just do this. I'm going to do that. And a large part of that, as I see the world as a Black woman, right? Through the lens of a Black woman. Talk to me a little bit about the cultural intersection between Blackness and yoga, because this in the gentrified element of DC, yoga had started to take a move, right? But I don't think back in the day when I came to DC, there was a lot of yoga studios. You talked about not being a lot of Black yoga instructors, but yoga wasn't our thing. We didn't call it our thing. It became like something that was introduced to us. But I don't think that's 100% the truth. So can you talk to me a little bit about that cultural intersection between Blackness and yoga, or Blackness and meditation?
Well, certainly, meditation and prayer overlap quite a bit. And so that transcends all time and religions and cultures and things like that. So as at the start of time, Black people have been meditating and praying and doing devotional practices and so on and so forth. And there is some historical reference to yoga being practiced in Africa, and there's much controversy about where it actually originated, India versus Africa versus other places. The point being, it's been in our bloodline for quite some time. When we talk about in the United States, it's still not mainstream, but we can look back to the 70s when, again, not mainstream, but there were some pretty prominent people practicing yoga on a regular basis. Rosa Parks practiced yoga. Yes, absolutely.
I know that.
Yeah, Angela Davis began her yoga practice in prison, coping with solitary confinement. Alice and John Coltrane were avid yoga practitioners. Smokey Robinson, and several even Black athletes back in the day in the 70s were regularly practicing yoga, but it was not mainstream. When you think of all those people, right, there's a few things in common. They had resources, they had, wealth, they were practicing in private spaces mostly, because of course, practicing in white spaces was probably a little more challenging then as well. I think today some of those elements still exist, in a sense that representation matters, right? We say that frequently. It's become quite the phrase, but it's true. That feeling when you see someone that looks like you makes you feel comfortable, makes you feel accepted. There is a feeling that comes knowing that someone has a shared, you might not even know each other, but you know that person has experienced some of the same things that you've experienced, that they understand some of your adaptive ways because they're their adaptive ways because of that shared experience. So with regard to yoga being mainstream, it hasn't quite had that effect in our communities because that representation hasn't been mainstream. Are we working to change that? Are there more Black instructors now than in the 70s? Absolutely. Are there more Black owned studios now than in the 70s? Absolutely. We are trying to create that culturally relevant, culturally sensitive from the music that we play, from the way that we guide a posture because our body type, it's a lot of nuances and the conversation in the studio before and after class starts. All of that matters. And so I think what has held us back a lot is the lack of that representation. And I will say that, like I said, we're working on it and have made great strides, but it hasn't burst into the mainstream. But we're coming. We're coming. We need it.
I remember when I was counseling in a school in DC, I was there, the lead counselor. And one day the principal came to me and said, Linnell, we need to figure out a way to reduce some of these discipline reports, right? Because I'm pushing them in terms of why do we have this many Black and brown? This is our population. And we have disproportionality between these students that are in special education and receiving special education services, these students who are having discipline referrals or being kicked out of the classroom, and these students who are achieving this in this more traditional kind of way. And I would always push back. And so one day it came back to me in terms of, hey, why don't you create a program, create some sort of pilot program that's going to help with the discipline reports at the very least, right? And then that's when I turned to yoga in the school, yoga and meditation in the school, bringing in practitioners who could lead the students, because I can lead through some guided meditation, but I can't lead through the practice of yoga because that's not my skill, right? Like that's not, I can do it, but I can't lead it, right? And there's a different level of grounding that takes place when you're leading it as well. But when we started having the children practice yoga and meditation, we immediately saw decreases in behavioral reports, like immediately. And so then we continued it. We continued it throughout the school year and in the subsequent years as well, where the students are still practicing yoga, especially before tests and after tests, especially when they're having some sort of physical, like a more psychosomatic response to something, then they're able to practice yoga. Talk to me a little bit about your twins, because they are of that school age, at 6 years old. And how do you incorporate yoga into their experience and into their life? Because this becomes part of your legacy, and they are part of your legacy, but not just for the legacy piece, for the fact that they're Black children in this country. How do you incorporate yoga into their life? What do you tell them, and what should parents be talking to their children about when talking about yoga or practicing yoga?
Yeah, one of the things that I really thought about is, what if I had these skills earlier in life? What if I learned to connect to my body and my breath? What if I learned to pause? What if I had these things as part of my tool chest much earlier than in my 40s. And Evan and Ian, that's something that I want them to be equipped with. So from the moment I got the keys to this place, they were in here. From the moment I started to see the benefits that yoga was providing me, I would have them, of course, kids are curious. So I'm on the mat. They want to be on the mat, on my mat with me. So
all up on mama, huh?
All up on me. And so, I took that as an opportunity to introduce them to, to movement in intentional ways, to breathing, to meditating, and to even sound bath and sound meditation, and being aware of the sensations in their body, and being aware of their power of choice. And you can, you can choose to feel this, and that is a choice, and might not be the best choice. But you could also choose this. That's beyond your control. You can recognize that it's beyond your control. You can recognize that that's somebody else's issue and not yours. But it takes an awareness, and they're only 6. And people say, "Oh, that's so complicated for them." No, even when they're playing with each other, Evan's being mean to me, mommy. Ian, how does that make you feel?
Yeah.
What are you feeling in your body? You have the choice. Do you want to continue to engage with Evan while she's being mean? Or, do you want to choose something differently? Yeah. And all of that is, that's an act of self-love. That's an act of self-awareness. That's an act of honoring your experience. And a lot of that is cultivated through connecting to your body and connecting to your breath. So we do yoga.
Yeah.
We don't do 60 minutes of yoga. It might be 15 minutes. We meditate. I break out my sound bowls, and they play the sound bowls. And nothing gives me more joy than when I look out, in the yard they're playing, and I see Ian. Or I see Evan, bust into a yoga pose, and I'm like, and it's spontaneous, and it just brings me such joy, and they do it all the time.
Yes.
And it just lets, I feel such joy that they are going to have that in their toolbox.
Yes. That's beautiful. I could understand that 100%, because kids, they listen to what we say, but because they don't have full understanding of everything, and words don't always stick for them, they pay so much attention to what we do and how they feel around us, and how we feel around them afterwards. They are so much connected to energy, and we sometimes take advantage of that, right? And so I imagine, like you said, after coming out of a yoga practice or engaging in a yoga practice with them or a meditation with them, how much more they want to be connected to you, right? How much more that strengthens that mother-child relationship with you. And it's beautiful. And so sometimes when parents are asking me, what are some of the things that they can do to strengthen their relationship with their children, I do say things like this, like have quiet moments with your child where you guys are just sitting in space with each other, right? Because they're going to feel you. And if you can ground yourself, they're going to feel that grounding, and you're going to model that for them as well. Talk to me a little bit about, this is me being a little crazy here, but every time I go to the yoga studio, well, rarely, sometimes when I go to the yoga studio, I don't see men. What's going on with men and yoga? Talk to me about it. I'm like, y'all need to ground y'all. That's a whole nother topic. Don't let me get started right there. But what is going on, this intersection between yoga and our fellas?
So I will say that it's all very similar. When you look to see the images of yoga, the vast majority of them first are white thin women.
Yes.
And then, doing some impossible yoga pose perfectly. And the same way that marginalizes African American women, or Black and brown women, or women of different body types, you very rarely see images of men. And then, you know, when you do see them, it's first the white male.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you may see some Black male images here and there. So I really think I can't stress the importance of seeing yourself in an experience, or seeing yourself in an activity that makes you think, I can do that, or that looks interesting to me.
Yeah.
When you don't see it, you assume that's for the other.
Yes.
And then there are gender things where, generally speaking, certainly there are very flexible men and inflexible women, but generally speaking, women are more flexible in their joints. And so sometimes when men go into a class that's predominantly women and they see a woman kind of pop into this pose, and you know they're still maybe trying to get the leg up,
right?
You know, that's not necessarily a space where they may feel comfortable to be authentic in how they truly present in that moment. And so I think that, again, there is also a movement with Black men in creating spaces specifically for Black men to, and you know, it's foreign to a lot of Black men that are coming up with the idea that they shouldn't express emotion, they shouldn't feel, they should just do. And meditation and yoga are very much about again, being and being still. And actually, when you're still and quiet, what makes it difficult sometimes is the emotion that comes up. And men are often taught that that's not their lane, that's not for them. So when you start to think about all of those things, they may think that's a thing for women, that's a thing for white women. There's not a space for me. And you know, men like physically, you know, people in general don't understand how physically demanding yoga can be.
Right. And
so
I was going to bring that up because when you talk about it in terms of yoga being a form of exercise, and men are like socialized to believe their exercise means that they have to get stronger, they have to get buffer, they have to get faster. They don't connect yoga to that, right? But let me tell you, honey, one of those times when I was practicing yoga and I was supposed to get into some moves, I am a veteran, Army Corps to my heart, right? And I do my push-ups every day and my sit-ups every day, and I tried to get into that pose, Jay, and I could not do it. And I was like, wait, what happened here, right? I do agree that many people don't understand the strength and flexibility that's required to do yoga, and so they don't take it seriously, right? And I could see that being even more complicated for men who are trying to get buff and don't understand that a lot of those yoga positions tighten you up really quickly, right? They make you really firm and things like that. So it is very much a strength building exercise and very complementary to other forms of exercise that they're doing as well. Are there men-led yoga studios? Are there a lot of yoga studios of which the owner is a Black man or a man?
So yeah, there's actually the Black Male Yoga Initiative, and I'm blanking. His first name is Changa, I believe. But you know, there's a yoga initiative. There's Black Boys in Om. You know, there are a lot of movements, and a lot of them are spurred locally in the DMV. And so, you know, the premise to create what you wish existed is often a mandate for people of color. And I can say our brothers have and sisters have stepped up to that in yoga and are creating the spaces and creating the interest and the exposure. And when we think about you know, another segment we could do that would take the whole time would be, you know, health disparities and how yoga can actually improve cardiovascular health, which Black people are more likely to die from, that can reduce the risk of stroke, that can help psychological disorders, which we are all disproportionately affected by.
Yeah.
And so it's not just the spiritual effects of yoga, but there's hardcore impacts to our longevity, our life expectancy, our quality of life, that our community can benefit from, and it creates community.
Yeah, it does. It's so funny because you just mentioned some of the things that that are disproportionate in our health. Um, and when I in my position around therapy, I sometimes run into folks who are saying, yeah, that's our family's health issue. This is what goes on. It's not anything that I could really change, right? Like I can't really do anything about that. Yeah, my family has cardiovascular issues. I'ma just, this is what I just have to deal with, right? Like this is what is just being passed on to me. How do you help folks combat that in terms of both as a physician and as a yogi? I can call you a yogi, right? That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Please do.
Oh, come on, yogi. Come on, Dr. Yogi. So how do you? What is the message that you say to people around that when they're like, this is just what it is, and I can't do anything about it?
Oh. Well, that's when education, comes in, and even asking the question. So I would say even before that, approaching a patient with, a curiosity about their experience and their beliefs surrounding their health, promoting the idea of partnership. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to partner with you in your health. Dispel myths. Yes, there is a big genetic component to cardiovascular disease. There's a big genetic component to even some mental health disorders and some endocrine disorders like diabetes. There you can't deny that there's a huge genetic component there. But however, there are things that we can do to mitigate the risk. And I can't overemphasize diet. I can't overemphasize weight management. I can't, overemphasize avoiding toxic habits like smoking and excessive drinking, and of course, drugs. And we are compelled to introduce things too. So, in again, broadening someone's scope about what is available to me. Oftentimes when people start yoga, it starts a domino effect of healthier practices. Mm-hmm. You start watching what you're eating. Mm-hmm. You start noticing how you feel when you eat certain things. Mm-hmm. And you start making changes, and there are different types of yoga that, go from the very serene and not very physically challenging to the super physically challenging. Yeah. So as a physician, I not only talk about traditional medicine and all of those traditional sets of recommendations, but I do introduce yoga and meditation practices to patients, just to kind of give them more options.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I am absolutely in love with yoga. You know that. And every time we have our self-care series, I'm always like, Jay, are you available to do something with me? Because I do want more folks to see yoga instructors that look like them, and they see other classmates that look like them. And I'll be honest, there were many different times, and maybe even still times, where I go and I do yoga and I become so self-conscious about what my body is doing, right? Like, ooh, do I need to hold in my stomach a little bit? Wait, why isn't my arm straight? And, all of this kind of stuff. And it's always when the yoga instructor says something like, just relax. Like they can't even hear me because it's self-talk, but they always say it at the right time. Like, it's okay. Just relax. And when that happens, it allows me to go back to this place of peace, like you mentioned. My leg probably still won't go up, but it allows me.
And that's okay.
And it's okay. And it's okay. Yeah. And it feels good because at the end, I'm like, but I tried, right? And I did something positive for myself and for my body, and that becomes my motivation for doing it again. I know we're running out of time. But I want it to be a little bit ratchet if you let me.
God.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
girl. Come on.
All of these, this one I got my tea, girl. This one I got my tea.
Okay.
Of all of these crazy celebrities and crazy things going on, who are you looking out at the world like, you know what, you need some yoga in your life. If you got some yoga in your life, you wouldn't be acting like this if you had some yoga. Who's the first person that pops in mind when you think of that?
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
That is an interesting question. I can say that, you know, I'm not much of a connoisseur of, you know, the youngins' music these days. You know, I can't even believe I'm saying that, you know, because it wasn't too long ago that, you know, I was the youngin. But, you know, now, you know, I look at some of the situations that they get themselves into, you know, with the violence, and, you know, even with some of the messages that they're sending our young girls and even our young boys, glamorizing thug life and, you know, all of that stuff. And, you know, a lot of it is entertainment, but the message still comes through to our youth. So, you know, if I had to, and of course I can't call any of them by name, but if I had to select a group, it would be, you know, the younger rappers who kind of propagate and promote those negative messages and negative self-image and kind of glorify stuff that's gonna get you killed or in jail or
especially because, you know, you mentioned that it's entertainment, and it's entertainment for the artist, but it's like real life for the audience, right? Like, they take these songs and they design a life based off of these songs. They take what they see on TV and design their life to reflect that. Like, these become their role models. So for the artist, it's entertainment, but not understanding that people are really living their life off of this. I was watching TV with Megs yesterday, and it was some person on there, and I was like, she looked like Kim Kardashian, and Megan was like, that's not Kim Kardashian. I was like, they all look like Kim Kardashian. They all look like Kim Kardashian. Maybe they need some yoga so they can have some awareness to themselves, so they don't all have to try to look like the same person, right? And so for me, it's, yes, the entertainers and the artists, but it's also some of these folks on like these housewives shows,
reality shows.
I'm like, you are sitting here telling everybody how to live their life, and you're not even grounded yourself, right? Like, I need you to get grounded a little bit more. So here I am telling people, y'all need to be in therapy, y'all need to be in yoga, y'all need to do some meditation and all that stuff. One day we're gonna be picked up by some big old syndicated show, you and Jay, because we gotta get these people together.
Yeah, we gotta you know, spread the word. Like, you know, they have such a voice, and, you know, the entertainment is important, but, you know, also use your voice. And I always say, use your powers for good. You know, when you get a platform and you get a wide audience, entertain, but then also use it for good.
Yeah. That made me think real quick. I know we're about to end. It made me think about some of the housewives when they start saying that they go to therapy and they're in yoga and they're doing that kind of stuff, how in the next season we don't see them anymore, right? And I'm always like, is it because that wasn't popular and so it didn't stick as a theme for the show, or is it because they, you know, found themselves in a sense of awareness where they said that wasn't welcoming for their life anymore, like that season has passed? It's always interesting to me when celebrities start talking about self-care practices and what that really does to their career. Is it beneficial? Is it not? Of course, I always believe it's beneficial because it's healing, right? Like, we heal things. We heal our things, purify.
And when you heal and you change different beliefs and perceptions that you may have held on to a long time, you act differently, and you honor yourself and you honor your body differently. So practices that you used to engage in, you now don't see that as something that serves the highest version of yourself. And you have the power, again, of choice. I choose not to engage in that because that doesn't serve my highest good.
Yeah.
So,
I have Jalila, who was helping us and following us on social media, and she said that a lot of folks had really enjoyed hearing about yoga and the connection to African practices, right? Because again, that's not something that we've always been accustomed to. So I really want people to understand more about yoga and and the connection to us throughout the diaspora, as well as yoga and children and things like that. So maybe that's something we could talk about at another time. But in the meantime, how do they get in contact with you? Because they may have a direct question for you, right? Like, so can you give me a resource for yoga and African practices? Or can you give me a resource for yoga and grounding my children? Or a resource for yoga and men? How do they get in contact with you?
Well, we have our website, which is www.replenishym.com. You can certainly email me at info@replenishym.com. And then we're on Facebook and Instagram at replenish_yoga_meditation. So we're on Twitter. So we're Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and the website. And of course, you can email me. Our studio is located in Bowie. So we're at 6772 Racetrack Road in Hilltop Plaza. We do offer in-studio and virtual classes. So just, check the schedule and see what appeals to you. And we see you on the mat.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that the schedule for the classes are on the website, right?
Yes.
And we can access the website directly. We can access the website through your Instagram page. We can access the website through Twitter. So any of the ways that we get in contact with you, it'll take us back to the schedule. And that's when we can see the virtual classes and the in-person classes, right?
Absolutely. And if there's a more specific question, info@replenishym.com. I'm always happy to share. Always.
Yes. Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you guys know how to get in contact with me too. I'm Dr. Plummer of Onyx Therapy Group. I am the CEO and I love what I do and I love spending time with my friends. Listen, okay, I got to talk about that later. But if you are trying to get in contact with me, you could definitely hit me up on our website at onyxtherapygroup.com. You can also follow us on IG as well. We are Onyx Therapy Group, all one word, Onyx Therapy Group. And you can follow me individually if you want to at Mahogany Sunshine. Those are our best ways. We haven't gotten into Twitter yet, Jay. I don't know. I'm overwhelmed right now by the social media, but I am excited for those of you guys that were able to tune in with us via Facebook Live. Again, it's my fault. I didn't know all of the things around LinkedIn, but eventually we'll get in on that LinkedIn. Pay attention to us on our socials. I'm hoping to do some more work with Jay in the next couple months around the self-care series with yoga. Because it's so purifying and it's so important and it's so necessary to see ourselves in the work we're doing. So thank you so much, Dr. Jacquelyn.
Thank you, Doctor.
My friend Jay. And I'll see you later, hon.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.